What's going on, everybody? This is going to be the second what if topic I wanted to talk about. And what if is basically where I look at a particular time in 40K's timeline, alter something, and then see how that affects things. What would be different? What if something, and then how would that play out? And in this case, it's going to be my topic I actually given the most thought on for the longest amount of time. What if there were no fallen Dark Angels? I wanted to start with what if for the Alpha Legion being loyal because I felt it had bigger ramifications at the end and more fun to be first. But this one is a topic that I've been thinking about for a very long time because as a Dark Angel fan, as a loyalist Dark Angel fan, I've always wondered, what if we didn't have fallen Dark Angels to worry about? Because while the plot concept is an interesting one, I feel execution has faltered. I understand where they're going with the fallen Dark Angels, but I think ultimately it's doing more harm than good. Let me explain. Real quick before going into the what if. The fallen is an interesting concept, but it's not a unique one. Firstly, it comes after the whole Horus heresy, right? It would have been a bit more unique and maybe had a bit more gravitas to it if the fallen happened prior to the heresy happening and it was like a secret war that the Dark Angels Legion was pursuing, and then the heresy happens and they had to pursue more on top of it. I think that would have had a bit more of an impact for me personally, but it was basically like, well, Horus failed, well, screw it, let's imbue Luther with power, he seems upset, and let's see what can happen there. Is kind of how it feels with the Chaos Gods. So it just feels not very unique from the get-go. Plus, we have renegade chapters throughout the history of 40K, and even loyalist chapters that have a portion of themselves go renegade. And yet they're still loyal. Obviously, it stays a secret. They keep it a secret amongst themselves, but there are at least 1 to 2 examples of official chapters that have had a portion of their number go renegade and go traitor, where the Inquisition knows about it and basically tasks the loyalist chapter with destroying their erstwhile brethren and keep close watch. We also have the Badab War, where the Executioners, the Lamenters, and the Mantis Warriors chapters strayed from the Imperium, fought against the Imperium and therefore against the Emperor, misguided as they were by their Astral Claws allies to do so. They still did it. And they were given the benefit of the doubt, you could say, to go and do a penance crusade to prove their loyalty at the end of it. All this stuff for me takes the sting and the edge and the importance of the fallen concept away from it. As much as I try to make it feel important, it just doesn't really feel that special or important to me. It never really did. It just felt more of a nuisance and a hampering. On top of that, again, for me, this isn't fact, it's just opinion, I feel it stagnates the Unforgiven as a whole. We're talking about the first Legion here and its successors, with access to strange and wondrous technologies that no other Legion was permitted to have access to. We know that more so and more recent fluff for them, but still it makes sense being the first. With a rich, secretive heritage, of course, but a lot of potential with being the first. We're talking about a chapter that the entire first company only fights in Terminator armor. That's a rare privilege to have. Not many chapters can boast that much technology, basically. So, and their Unforgiven successors can too. So it really, there's a lot of potential there that just gets, in my opinion, basically wasted by constantly pursuing this fallen agenda. It kind of, everything circular logics back to it. Even when they're not fighting fallen, they're always ever on the lookout. And I get it. But when you read some of the non-fallen stories out there, a good example is the Purging a Catalyst. It's in the air, and some points of the story, it hangs over the setting like a mist, the whole concept of the fallen, and for no reason other than the fact that, hey, fallen, they don't mention it specifically, but it hangs like a mist there, and it's just, I think, unfortunate. I think it stagnates the potential for plot development and storyline development for the Unforgiven as a whole, especially with the addition they made in 8th edition. That addition is the Great Rift happening and Ezekiel receiving a vision, as librarians did when the Great Rift happened. And Ezekiel's vision was the actual full strength of the Fallen, how big they actually were, and how it was far bigger than they could have ever have guessed. And I think that was the worst thing they could have done because it really trivializes things. It makes it go, oh, well, look how many there are. Isn't that neat? It doesn't add weight to it. It just makes it feel kind of lame, in my opinion. And I know I'm not alone in that. There's like internet stuff out there that have similar viewpoints. But anyways, we have the fall, and that's what we're stuck with. So what if we didn't have any fallen dark angels? How would that play out? Well, we first have to look at Luther, because Luther is the topic of this. It's Luther's prideful ego that's somewhat fragile and a bit whiny, as I like to put it, just to kind of annoy Luther fans out there. But he's got a fragile, whiny, prideful ego. And that's not a bad thing. I'm not saying, oh, that's terrible character design. It leads to a flawed character, but he's only human too. We got to remember, he never can become an Astartes. He was too old to undergo the process. And unlike Aemon with 1,000 Suns, there's no crazy psyker magic to allow him to survive the process. So he cannot ever be a Space Marine and never becomes an Astartes, never undergoes that training and conditioning, which might have strengthened his ego and soul and so forth. But anyways, he's an alpha type character. He was on the road to greatness with the Order, a prominent member of the Order, probably would have eventually risen to lead it and then unify Caliban and do what the Lion did, but under Luther being the leader and all that, probably would have been the case had he not found the Lion. But the Lion was found by him, brought back, they grew close together, but the Lion rapidly, just exceeded all the humans in Caliban in capability. He rapidly just eclipsed them, as Primarchs do, and became, the top leader, the Alpha. And Luther was forced to be second fiddle, which doesn't sit well with his character. So he's going to have natural misgivings as a human for that. So we have to understand that. And with it understood, we got to look at a particular point in the timeline of 40K during the Great Crusade, where it normally would have come to a head and is kind of the straw that breaks the camel's back here. And in the official, in the actual canon of 40K's timeline, this is when the Lion sends Luther back to Caliban. It's this act that should have been viewed as an act of honor and trust by the Primarch to send his closest friend back to be responsible for overseeing Caliban and overseeing the creation of new Dark Angel legionaries, basically the future of the Legion. Should have been an honor. It was viewed as a slight, and that was what basically boiled over for Luther and started the whole process, truly, of the Fallen. So here we're going to change that. Instead, the Lion consults Luther about what he wants to do for Caliban at this juncture in the Great Crusade. And they formulate a plan together, as Advisor and Primarch tend to do in any Legion. And ultimately the Primarch ends up with a plan to send Zahariel back, as is normal in the storyline of 40K. Zahariel being a Caliban native, he can oversee like the culture and soul and heritage of the Order, and Caliban staying with the Dark Angels, not being lost amongst the sea of change that happens to the world of Caliban underneath the Imperium, because it does undergo a rapid change from how it was. This allows the heart and soul, if you will, of the Primarch's viewpoint of with the Legion and how he suffused it into there to stay there. So Zahariel's kind of gonna have that role. He's not gonna be in charge of everything, but he's gonna make sure that the Order and the ways of Caliban aren't lost. On top of that, they need a leader. They need a veteran leader who knows Astartes, knows what it means to be Astartes, has led Astartes, has fought countless battles. And this means somebody pre-Caliban, which is why you need Zahariel to keep the Caliban concept alive amongst the training and all that. So they settle on a fan favorite, Estellon. He is a Fallen in the normal storyline. There are no Fallen in this scenario. What if? So he's going to be a prominent Dark Angel leader. He is a leader of a chapter of Dark Angels amongst the Legion. So him and his forces are going to be sent back to Caliban to oversee its defenses, its training of recruits and all that, and basically be in charge for the future of the Legion, with Zahariel assisting. Estellon was just a no-brainer choice as a commander, as a leader, as a veteran, and all that. So each character is given their orders from the Primarch with Luther by his side, and because of the way it was discussed and the way it was given to them, this is not viewed as a slight, but as an honor. It's viewed as something that they can take with pride. They're being trusted by the Primarch of their legion with the future of the legion in their hands and Caliban in their hands. So they go forth back to Caliban with Astalon's forces and oversee the training of the Dark Angels on Caliban, oversees the future of Caliban. This allows Luther to stay with the Lion during the Great Crusade at his side. Not literally in all battles, but he's basically there with the Lion amongst it all. This lets a lot of mending happen to Luther's fragile ego. Healing he didn't know he even needed, because some of the misgivings are just natural subconscious things at that point, being only human and all that. So the rest of the Great Crusade happens as normal with Luther by the Lion's side, and a lot of mending into Luther's pride and ego happen, and really cements the bond between the two, and really cements the concept of no fallen for this what if. This leads us to the beginnings of the Horus heresy, back when only 4 legions were known to be traitor: the Emperor's Children, World Leaders, Death Guard, and Sons of Horus. It's at this juncture, once the news hits them like a freight train, that the Lion, consults Luther and tells him, I need you back on Caliban. This does, of course, receive some resistance, being a close friend and all that, and naturally doesn't want to leave. But Lion explains, in his tactical, taciturn way, why he needs Luther back on Caliban, and how Luther is the only one he can trust as his closest friend to tell them the news if they don't know it already, ease any doubts that they may have because of it, and make ready for war. There's a good chance that the traitors will sack Caliban, or sack any loyalist homeworld. They know where they are, they know about them, and it would be a major blow to the infrastructure of a legion. And he needs Luther back there, his most trusted confidant, to oversee even more of a step up in defensive and training. So, with that said, Luther takes a small strike force and makes best speed to Caliban. This is at the beginning of the heresy, so the warp turbulence isn't as bad, and he's able to make decent speed to Caliban. The rest of the heresy plays out like normal. Isstvan 5 happens, the whole Siege of Terror thing happens, the Night Lords v Dark Angels happens, everything happens like normal. This leads us all the way to post-heresy, with the scouring happening when the forces of the Imperium push back the traitor forces to the Eye of Terror. This is going on like normal, and it's at this point that communication with Caliban becomes spotty, drops, and then a burst panic message happens, and then they go quiet again. And that burst panic message is called such because the ferocity which was sent, the urgency in which it was sent, and the direness in which it was sent actually burns out several astropaths in the Dark Angels fleet. And because they just had to make the communication go out, it wasn't targeted. So some other legions near the Dark Angels received the same message about what's going on. As a result, while there is some general protesting for the Dark Angels rapidly redeploying their entire forces, the legions near them in close proximity that received the similar the same message basically appease the protests and don't resist it, and cover the slack, if you will. And the Dark Angels Legion makes speed to Caliban as fast as possible. So yes, we are getting the Battle of Caliban still, because that message was Caliban's burning, require assistance. But there's no fallen. So what this means is we got a traitor attack on the homeworld. And who else would it be but the Night Lords led by Comrade Kurz, as well as a small detachment of Iron Warriors that happen to be there as well, but no Primarch. The Night Lords and the Dark Angels have a history. Remember, the Dark Angels Legion basically shattered that legion. They want blood, they want vengeance. And the Iron Warriors is there to add insult to injury, because back before Isstvan 5, when the Iron Warriors were still thought to be loyal, the Primarch of the Dark Angels, the Lion, gifted Perturbo some Ordinatus machines to take within the Isstvan 5 to attack Horus. And the Dark Angels liberated those machines from the Sons of Horus forces on planet. So they basically killed a bunch of traitors, got the machines to give to a legion they thought was loyal, only to have it turn out to be traitor. It was kind of pointless. And so it's insult to injury. to have them there. So the Battle of Caliban happens, albeit a bit differently. There's fleet combat as well as ground combat, bombardments happening, counter bombardments happening, weird warp fluctuations sensed by librarians, odd seismic activity happening at any Iron Warriors in transposition that stays for any period of time, as well as seeing some odd traitor mechanicum forces alongside them. All this culminates with the sustained traitor bombardment, counter bombardment, and counter fleet activities to the final battle, which, just like with the original storyline, happens by the Order's Fortress Monastery. It's at this point that the Iron Warriors start to just withdraw from from the Night Lords and start pulling back and going off world as seismic activity increases. At this climax, we have the Lion, storming through the Fortress Monastery of the Order to help push back forces and find Luther. He encounters and goes past Estella and his forces holding the courtyard. He encounters Cypher, the ever mysterious Cypher, and his Dark Angel loyalist forces, pushing back Night Lord forces from the Librarium and relic areas of the Fortress Monastery. And as the Lion ever pushes deeper, he is met with less and less resistance and less Dark Angels as well. Clearly they went to the most important areas until he gets to the command area where he figured Luther would be. And unable to raise Luther on comms or anything, he bursts forth, and what we have is a parody almost of the scene on Horus's battle barge with Horus, Sanguinius, and the Emperor. In this case, it's Comrade Kurz, the Lion, and the role of Sanguinius is played by Luther. So Luther is dead on the floor in a pool of blood slick on Comrade Kurz's talons. Not much of battle fatigue can be seen or thought to be seen attributed to Luther on Comrade Kurz. We have to remember the only reason why Luther in the original story was able to stand up to the Lion was because he was infused by chaos like Horus was. The four chaos gods blessing Luther, just like the four chaos gods blessed Horus. Luther didn't have that. Comrade Kurz doesn't have that either. But the difference is clear. Primarch, not even in Astartes. A superhuman soldier, but not on Astartes level. This just pushes the Lion over the edge, and a mighty roar, a mighty yell, and they go into a furious battle between the two. Vengeance in each other's eyes. It's just hatred on all accounts. Their battle literally shaking apart the command area of the Fortress Monastery. But the damage is done, and their battle is brief. Wounds on both sides, they're both wounding each other, but being Primarchs, it's kind of superficial. But damage done, and as quickly as the battle starts, it abruptly ends with Comrade Kurz breaking off. As he does, and basically breaks through a window, all dramatic, evil Batman style, what we have going on is massive seismic activity just boiling up and building up and boiling over, as well as warp storms start caressing the planet's surface, and what we have is the destruction of Caliban happening like before. The difference is the fleet's up top, and the Loyalist fleet doing what they can, but then is stunned by what's happening on the surface below, allows the Traitor fleet to break off with minimal resistance and leave without being pursued or dogged the entire way. And the scene below the Loyalist fleet is one that we know from the official fluff, the destruction of Caliban, with the Fortress Monastery of the Order being the only surviving massive chunk of rock, hence the rock left. A warp storm has ripped apart the weakened planet from the bombardment from the Dark Mechanicum machinations, and what we got happening is the same thing that we see, only from a different kind of cause. So Caliban is destroyed. The Dark Angel Legion, deploys to the rock to find the Lion, knelt over the body of Luther to find Estellon and Cypher pushing back remnants of the traitor forces that were stuck on the rock, basically. And we get the same ending that we got with the destruction of Caliban in the official storyline. The difference, obviously, is no fallen Dark Angels got sucked away because there's no fallen Dark Angels. Luther, instead of being captured, is dead and had no need to be captured. And the lion is still there, alive and well, obviously grieving and full of hate. So, we have them basically licking their wounds like normal, figuring out a plan. And the second founding happens. And this is where we're going to go and kind of not leave things off 100%, but this is where we get to see the true changes of what happens when there are no fallen Dark Angels. The difference here is a color scheme change because I want to. That's the only reason why I'm doing this for this what if, and a change of one of the second founding chapters. So we have the Dark Angels keeping the original Legion color scheme in this scenario. They don't go green. They stay black. They don't go green. Instead, the Angels of Vengeance go green. So we have a swapping of the color schemes there. We are going to have eventually the bone white of the Deathwing, but everything else is going to be black. And, part of this is kind of in grief and in mourning for Luther, but the lion and all that. They keep the black colors and all, and so forth and whatnot. I just want to have them be black. That's the only reason why I did that. More importantly, for this what if, the Angels of Absolution have a complete different feeling now. In the main story, in the real story of 40K, we have the Angels of Absolution still hunting the Fallen, but they view themselves absolved of the sins of the Fallen. They don't view themselves damned by this. They keep it a secret, of course, but they don't do it out of fear of being damned. They do it for the fact that it's a matter that it should only be taken care of by Dark Angels and nobody else needs to know. That's how they were with the Fallen. There's no Fallen to worry about now. So the Angels of Absolution have a different viewpoint entirely. And that viewpoint is a much more zealous viewpoint that the Unforgiven, as they still are known, have. They are called Unforgiven because the destruction of their homeworld while they were there, the death of Luther, the destruction of their homeworld at the hands of traitor forces is unforgivable. And until the Night Lords and Iron Warriors are wiped out, they cannot be forgiven for allowing Caliban to fall. Hence, Unforgiven. The Angels of Absolution kick that up a notch. For them, it's not just the Night Lords and Iron Warriors, but all traitor legions must die. All the traitor legions' blood must be spilt for any absolution to truly take place. They view it as not just Night Lords and Iron Warriors that need to die. Obviously, the Unforgiven as a whole will kill any traitor legion, but the rest of the Unforgiven hold a special hatred specifically for the Night Lords and Iron Warriors, and the Angels of Absolution have that level of zealous hatred for all traitor legionary forces. For if Horus didn't go traitor, if Horus didn't turn, none of this would have happened. If, the Emperor's children didn't turn, we would have had more forces. If the Iron Warriors weren't so flawed, they wouldn't have, gone straight from the Emperor's light and plagued us. If this insert traitor legionary force here is all their fault, the destruction of Caliban, because they went and turned from the Emperor's grace. That's how they're going to view it, and they're going to be led by Astellon. I figured have Astellon be the first chapter master of the Angels of Absolution because while on Caliban, when Luther returned, he and Luther developed a close bond, a strong bond with each other, and Luther's death would have had Astellon just have these realizations that yes, the Night Lords and the Iron Warriors must pay, but so much every other traitor legion. Horus is just as responsible for this as Conrad Kurz and so on. So that's the only differences for the second founding outside of the other successors. They still are known as the Unforgiven. The Lion is still with them. So what we have is the successors happening, but being much more close-knit. The Lion, ensuring this. And we have a straying from the Codex Astartes. The Codex Astartes was penned by Gulliman, and the Lion still existing now, sees the merit of its ways, but ultimately looks at it as another tome to consult and check out if need be. Instead of restructuring his legion into chapters and having it follow the Codex Astartes layout, he keeps the Hexagrammaton in check for all of his successors. So we have the Hexagrammaton in check alongside them being the size of a chapter. So instead of it being whole chapters just invested in being Dreadwing or Deathwing or whatever, we have those specialized forces broken down and being part of the chapter formation. With Deathwing being the first company, and with Ravenwing still being second company, we have the rest of the Hexagrammaton being more of a specialized role in which forces are brought together and trained. So instead of being full-on companies, the rest of them are basically battle formations and training that Deathwing or Ravenwing may be a part of alongside a certain company or what have you. Or who knows, maybe all of them are their own companies and they don't really have reserve companies. That could be even more fun. It could be kind of Black Templar style, or even Space Wolf-esque in style. There's no reserve companies for the Dark Angels. Instead, we have the 6 Hexagrammaton forces, and then line forces that are reinforced by it. And every force is responsible for an intake of recruits and training outside of the Hexagrammaton. They are, to join Deathwing, you got to prove yourself. To join Ravenwing, you got to prove aptitude and so forth. So we're going to have 4 battle line forces, 6 specialized forces amongst the Dark Angels, and their unforgiven successors. So that's the other big change here now. Past that, it's kind of a choose-your-own-adventure thing. You could say the Disciples of Caliban chapter originally thought to be created to hunt Cypher. No need for them to hunt Cypher. Now they're created specifically for hunting Traitor Primarchs. Obviously a tall order, but they are going to be specifically trained or specifically created with that goal in mind, which means they're going to do massive leadership disruption roles against traitor forces. And that's really where I'm going to leave it for the what if. The rest of it's choose-your-own-adventure style. Does the lion go and disappear? Does the lion stay prevalent amongst the Dark Angels chapter and kind of secluded? And does the Dark Angels and their unforgiven successors basically operate as a huge amoeba-like legion, much to the chagrin of the rest of the Imperium at large? Is it much more obvious because the lion's there to kind of throw his weight into the mix and say, listen, this is what we're doing, deal with it? Who knows, right? That's kind of beyond the scope here, but it's food for thought to flesh it out on your own if you so desire, just for the fun of it. But to summarize, what if there were no fallen Dark Angels? You would have Luther staying with the Lion up to the beginning of the Horus Heresy, mending that relationship. Luther then going back at the beginning of the Horus Heresy to strengthen Caliban. The heresy playing out like normal. The battle for Caliban happening against, in this case, Night Lords and Iron Warrior forces at this point. Caliban being torn apart, Luther killed by Conrad Kurz, causing that plus the destruction of Caliban to give them a different reason for be calling themselves the Unforgiven, and a little bit of difference in creation of certain chapters, with the Lion still being alive amongst them, and keeping their Legion format more so because the Lion's there to basically throw his weight in and say, we will take the Codex Astartes to heart, but we're not going to restructure ourselves around it. We have our Angelus, tome Angelus stuff of way of doing things, our Hexagrammaton. We will infuse the best parts of the Astartes alongside our Hexagrammaton, but we will not just conform to this. We have no need. We are the first type of deal. We know what we're doing, basically. That kind of concept. So yeah, thanks for sticking through it. It's a long one. All these what-ifs are going to be long winded. It's just the way of things. So hopefully you enjoyed sticking around, me talking way too long about something that'll never be. Anyways, what are your thoughts on this? Share it in the comment section below. Of course, this is going to probably ruffle some feathers, especially with the Fallen fans out there. I just thought it'd be a fun what if, because instead what we're seeing is the Dark Angels, in this case in 40k, being more like how they were instead of being so consumed by a one quest. We get to see what they would be like, theoretically, if they didn't have to worry about that. If they could just continue fighting like they did, only with hatred and vengeance in their hearts, specifically for 2 of the traitor legions, and of course all traitors in general. Anyways, that's it. Thanks very much for sticking through it, and until next time, take it easy.